Everybody, thank you for being here today. We're really excited to have Ann Baldridge with us. And Ann is the Community Programs Director at the Resource Conservation District for Greater San Diego County. And not only is that a comprehensive title, but she also says that that's in partnership with the Fire Safe Council of San Diego County and the Wild Willow Farm and Education Center. Now that would be almost a mini program in itself, explaining how those various groups interact. But and we are so delighted that you are here to talk to us in depth about Monarchs. There has been a real community excitement about planting milkweed, about just the whole story around Monarchs. And we're so looking forward to having you fill us in even more about what we can do, what we're seeing. So without further ado, Ann, welcome and thanks for being here.
Well, thank you. And thanks so much for inviting me. I'm really excited to know that your community is being so active in supporting monarchs and planting native milkweed. And I'm really happy to be here today. So let me just go ahead and share my screen so I can pull up my presentation. Okay. Can you see that okay?
Yes.
All right, great, thank you. So I'm going to try to touch on lots and lots of different things about monarch butterflies today. Also knowing that anything that we do to support monarchs is going to also support other pollinators and other wildlife too. But we'll touch on, the life cycle, the migration, challenges that monarchs are facing, and, various ways that we can all help. As Carol mentioned, I work for the Resource Conservation District of Greater San Diego County, and we do have lots of different projects, and we also support the Fire Safe Council of San Diego County, which is a nonprofit organization, a 501c3, and then we have a farm that we run as well. So just wanted to give you a very quick run through of our work. And if you've never heard of a resource conservation district before, we are a special district, so a type of local government, but we're independent and we're non-regulatory. So everything we do is, voluntary participation for people. We don't make any rules. We don't enforce any rules. We're just here to help conserve natural resources. We're one of 3 resource conservation districts, or RCDs, in San Diego County. We cover the majority of the county. And we're one of about 95, I think it is now, RCDs across the state of California. And then across the country, there are lots and lots of conservation districts as well, about 3,000 of them. And they're called different things in different states, soil and water conservation districts in some parts of the country. And, but we're all, at the heart of it, we're all conservation districts. So just to touch on our programs here in San Diego really quick, each conservation district responds to the conservation needs of the area that it serves. And so as you all are well aware, I'm sure, wildfire is a big concern for our county. So we do a lot of work on wildfire safety. We run fuel reduction programs for residents, and we also do a lot of work in the community to support community fire safe councils. We do education and outreach, and we do that across all of San Diego. We also run a few environmental education programs for youth from age kindergarten through to 12th grade. We operate 2 community gardens down in the South Bay, one in the Tijuana River Valley and one in the Sweetwater Regional Park in Bonita. And these are for local residents to have access to space for growing their own food and to spend time outside. We do, the carbon farming icon there is to represent the work we do to provide technical assistance to farmers and ranchers to help them implement land management practices that helps improve soil health and to lock carbon into the soil. We have our own farm as well. It's called Wild Willow Farm. It's down in the South Bay, very close to our Tijuana River Valley Community Garden. On the farm, we grow food for local people. We have a community supported agriculture program, and we sell to some local restaurants, and we have a farm stand. And in fact, this Saturday we're doing, and as long as strawberries last, we're doing You Pick Strawberries. So if you ever finding yourself down in the South Bay on a Saturday, stop by and pick some strawberries. But at the farm, not only do we grow food, we also have an extensive education program for people of all ages. We have workshops, classes, field trips, tours. It's just a beautiful place to spend time. And of course, we work on pollinator health. We started doing this in 2014 with a focus on the monarch. This is when people really started talking about the population declines that monarchs were facing. And we knew that we wanted to do something to help. So we started with focusing on encouraging people to plant milkweed, which is, of course, the host plant for monarchs. It's the only plant that they can that they need for breeding and raising the next generation of monarch butterflies. And through that work, we connected with lots of other agencies and organizations also concerned with monarchs and other pollinators. And we all eventually collaborated together to join form the San Diego Pollinator Alliance. So we're a network of agencies and organizations working across the region on pollinator health. And that formed in about 2016. Some of our main objectives are to help create good habitat for pollinators, and that's on any kind of scale or size of land, from home gardens and school gardens all the way through to big restoration sites on public land, private land, home gardens, community gardens, anywhere where pollinator habitat isn't one specific shape or size. It can be anywhere. And we also always advocate for the use of native plants. That's native host plants, like native milkweeds for monarchs, as well as native nectar sources, so native flowering plants. The Pollinator Alliance is headed by us at the RCD in collaboration with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We have quarterly meetings for our steering group, and currently we have 12 member organizations, and each member brings different strengths and areas of expertise. So it's a really great collaboration. So we aim to support pollinators through education, outreach, and on-the-ground programs. And I wanted to just quickly touch on some of the work that we do. I'm not sure if anybody has ever seen it, but at the San Diego County Fair, there is an area called the Infield Farm. And within the Infield Farm, we have a native pollinator demonstration garden. It's next to where Butterfly Farms up in Encinitas, who's one of our partners, sets up a big butterfly vivarium. And the pollinator garden is all using native plants, and it's there to kind of educate and inspire people on how to replicate that kind of habitat at home. It includes other aspects too, how you can reuse and recycle natural resources like wood to create these garden beds called hugelkultur beds. And we also do a little bit of work there on showing how you can use gray water to recycle water and water your landscapes. We have pollinator demonstration gardens at other sites too, at a couple of schools in the county, including one in Encinitas, and at some public spaces as well, at Sykes Adobe in Escondido and at Los Holgueros Nature Preserve up in Fallbrook. We have just almost finished our pollinator garden toolkit, which is meant to be a resource covering all the things you need to know to create a pollinator garden. That should be ready for the public very soon. And we're always working on growing and formalizing the Pollinator Alliance. And our newest project, started in 2019, is to create a plant and seed source of native milkweed, but from San Diego County, because most of the milkweed that we can get commercially comes from Central or Northern California. So we really feel it's important to have a local native milkweed source. And this is a snapshot here of all the members of the Pollinator Alliance. So some of these organizations you may be familiar with. The zoo is a member, the Natural History Museum is, and other organizations and agencies working either on conservation or pollinators specifically, or the California Native Plant Society. Maybe you've been to Butterfly Farms up in Encinitas. They have a wonderful, they're an education and conservation nonprofit, but they also have a nursery arm where you can buy lots and lots of milkweed. They sell a lot of native milkweed as well as some of the tropical milkweed too. So, why is all of this important? Why do we need to support pollinators? Well, many pollinating species are in decline at the moment. Many of the native bee species are on the brink of extinction, and they are very important pollinators. Beekeepers are reporting losing large proportions of their hives each year, about 30%. And about 19% of the butterflies in the United States are at risk of extinction. but pollinators provide many essential services to us and the landscape. It's known that pollinators are responsible for 1 in every 3 bites of food that we eat. You may have seen this image here before of the supermarket. I think this was done by Whole Foods several years ago. So on the left side, you see the supermarket produce section as it normally looks, very full of lots and lots of different kinds of fruits and vegetables. In a world without bees and other pollinators, it would look very different, very sparse, and that would really affect the food and the nutrition that we are able to access. And it's not only food that pollinators impact, but 85% of the world's flowering plants also rely on pollinators to reproduce. So our landscapes would look very different without pollinators as well, and would support, a lot fewer species that rely on those plants. Monarchs and honeybees do get a lot of attention because of the sharp declines, particularly with monarchs, but anything that we do for them, the good news is that it's going to support other pollinators and wildlife as well. So this may be familiar to many of you, but just wanted to quickly touch on this as well. This is the monarch life cycle. So the monarch life cycle starts with an egg. A female monarch will only lay an egg on milkweed, not on any other plant in your garden or anywhere else. She lays 1 egg at a time and can lay usually, it said between 300 and 400 eggs in her very short lifespan in the wild. So that egg is there for about 4 days, and then it hatches, and the larva or the caterpillar emerges. And the caterpillar goes through 5 instar stages where it sheds its skin and grows. And once it reaches its 5th instar stage, it then goes to form its chrysalis, which is this beautiful green pupa here. The butterfly or the larva is within the chrysalis for 8 to 15 days, and then it emerges as a butterfly. Now, I wanted to show this distinction too. You can tell a male and a female monarch butterfly apart in a couple of key ways. So the female has thicker black veins on its wings, and the male's veins here are thinner, and they also have these 2, you have a spot on each of its hind wings. So that's a really easy way to tell apart a male and a female monarch butterfly. The butterfly, the adult butterfly, lives for 2 to 5 weeks unless it is migrating. The migrating generation of monarch butterfly can live much longer, up to 6 to 9 months, which is pretty amazing, really. So where do we find monarch butterflies? They live across pretty much the whole of the United States, and there are 2 main populations. There's the eastern monarch butterfly, which lives east of the Rocky Mountains. This is the larger population that makes that very iconic migration down to Mexico. And then we have the western monarch. These are the monarchs that we see here in our gardens. They live west of the Rocky Mountains. And the population is a considerable amount smaller. Both of these populations migrate. And both of the populations have diminished quite a bit over the years, but particularly the western monarch is and the migration of the western monarch is in crisis. As I just mentioned, monarchs go through several generations each year, between 3 and 5 typically. The breeding generations live 2 to 5 weeks, and then that overwintering generation lives 6 to 9 months, where they are not breeding. They're in a stage called diapause, where they may nectar a little bit, but they mostly are clustering in their trees where they're overwintering. So they're really not using very much energy at all. There's also a resident or a non-migratory population in southern Florida. And more scientists who study monarchs are coming to believe that we have some resident urban populations along the coast in California as well. And some of you may see monarchs in your garden all year long, and we do think that there's a resident population here in San Diego as well. So this is down to our climate. Especially in Southern California, we have a very mild climate, and there is the presence of milkweed year-round, particularly through non-native milkweed, like tropical milkweed, which doesn't die back in the winter like our natives do. And so if milkweed is there, the monarchs can feed and breed on it. And more scientists are finding that these resident monarch populations have higher rates of disease, like a parasite called OE in particular. And that's because, the monarchs are kind of staying in the same place, using the same plants. and they're then passing that disease on to each other. It's the disease like this when a monarch lands on a plant to lay an egg, the spores of the parasite fall off onto the plant. And so when another monarch is using that plant, whether it's a larva or another butterfly, that disease gets spread around. And so the concern with these resident urban populations is that migrating populations might join them instead of overwintering, and then become diseased as well and spread that disease, and diseased monarchs will have fewer offspring. So it's, you know, a real concern for the size of the population of monarch butterflies. And if we don't have migration, it also means that monarchs will no longer be found in the historic Western range. So that's, you know, Oregon, Southern Washington, Utah, Idaho, Arizona, other places that monarchs would, you know, go to in the spring and summer. They will likely not do that anymore. They will stay in coastal California where the climate is mild all year round. So that would be a real loss for those other areas as well. The Xerces Society is a nonprofit organization that does a lot of really great work on monarchs and other pollinators, and they wrote a really good blog piece on this idea of urban resident monarch populations, and I've included the link in the presentation, and we can pop that in the chat later on too. And so here's just a map that shows the monarch migration patterns. In blue here, you see the overwintering areas, so along the California coast and a little bit down into Baja. And then down in Mexico is, another big overwintering area. The purple area here is Florida, where there's that non-migratory population. And then the green part of the map shows the spring breeding areas, and the yellow part shows the summer breeding areas. And then here is where the Rocky Mountains are. So we have the eastern population living here. They travel south when the weather starts to cool down and the milkweed starts to die and the nectar plants start to, go dormant because of, the weather gets so much cooler there. So they travel down to Mexico. They overwinter in these big groves of trees. And then when the weather starts to warm up again, they leave those overwintering sites, breeding and nectaring as they travel north. And then they repeat the cycle over and over again. But in the West, again, where the weather is milder, and where we're seeing decline is where we're really seeing declines in this migration. But typically, historically, monarchs would travel to the California coast, where they would roost in trees for the winter months. And then they would head back east, north and east again to their kind of western range when the weather warms up. There may be some monarchs from the western side that overwinter in Mexico, but not very much is known about that. We think mostly Western monarchs are overwintering on the California coast, and Eastern monarchs are traveling down to Mexico. And so, as I mentioned before too, the monarch population, the migratory monarch population is in decline. And we've been noticing that over the last 20 years, we've seen some pretty sharp declines. And this is measured by the numbers found at the overwintering sites in Mexico and in California. So the larger population, the Eastern population, is measured by the size of the area that they occupy at those overwintering sites. So they estimate that the population has fallen from about 384 million in the mid-90s to a low of 14 million in 2013. And then it kind of fluctuated a bit and came back up to about 60 million in 2019. The Western population, where they overwinter in California, has seen a much sharper decline. So back in the 90s, the population was about 1.2 million. That fell to about 30,000 in 2019. But this past winter, there was a quite staggering decline, and only around 2,000 monarchs were counted at overwintering sites this past winter. And so monarchs are observed at overwintering sites and recorded through a process called the Thanksgiving and New Year count, which is coordinated through the Xerces Society. And so that is, pretty sharp, and it's very concerning. Not included in that is what these urban resident populations might be. These are only numbers observed at the overwintering sites. And so if you wanted to look at that in a different way, this is a visual way to kind of understand the decline in population. So if we were to represent the population through these little butterfly icons here, for the Western population, in the 80s, that was 4.5 million, represented by lots and lots of butterflies here. In 2018, 2018-19, that fell down to less than 30,000. Well, now that we're at about 2,000 for overwintering in California, that's probably like the very teeny tiny tip of, this butterfly wing here. So that population that we have now at overwintering sites is less than 99% of what it was historically. For the overwintering colony that goes to Mexico, back in the mid 90s, they covered about 45 acres. So that's, filled out a whole butterfly here. For the 2018-19 winter, that fell down to 15 acres. So, about a third of a butterfly there. But in the 2019-20 winter, they covered the population covered less than 50% of the year before. So it only covered about 7 acres. So there are some really concerning declines happening there as well. So, the thing that fuels this migration is milkweed and nectar. And so, there are some threats to monarchs that are happening, in part because of habitat loss. So the habitat they need for breeding and feeding, particularly that breeding area over the summer, where they need milkweed to, grow future generations. A lot of milkweed in land that has typically grown milkweed has changed. So, where it may have been farmland or open space historically, development and various, changes in land use has impacted the availability of milkweed. Also, overwintering habitat has become degraded. There's been a lack of conservation and management of overwintering sites in Mexico and in California. And there is a lot of work being done now in California, at least, to try to preserve those overwintering sites. Pesticide use is another concern. Pesticides and herbicides can be overused, and that impacts monarchs and other pollinators. In particular, there are these systemic pesticides. You may have heard of neonicotinoids. These kind of pesticides get into the plant. And so that insects that eat it, whether it's, drinking the nectar or feeding on the leaves, take in those pesticides, and then it, kills those insects. So those are very, very harmful. Climate change is another factor that's threatening monarchs. We're experiencing erratic weather and temperature shifts, and that can impact the timing of flowering plants and milkweed. So when they emerge and when they're available for monarchs at, the various stages of their migration. And those fluctuations can affect the migration as well. And monarchs have natural predators. The chemicals that are found in in milkweed help make monarchs toxic or at least unpalatable to predators. But monarchs are still vulnerable to other diseases and parasitoids and parasites as well. And you can see here on the right a picture of the tachinid fly. They lay their larvae in the chrysalis, and that destroys the chrysalis. There's a lot of talk about native milkweed versus tropical milkweed. The tropical milkweed, the one that's most commonly available is this one on the top here. It has red and yellow flowers. This type of milkweed is not native to California or other parts of the United States, but is very widely available here. It's a beautiful plant. It's evergreen. It grows all year round. But that's a little bit challenging because our native milkweeds go dormant in the winter. So they die down, above the soil, but their roots are still alive under the soil. And then in spring, the native milkweeds reemerge. And it's very much in timing with overwintering patterns of monarchs. But the tropical milkweeds are present all year round. And that's thought to interfere with overwintering. And also, as we mentioned before, the disease spread. This is really important about the disease spread because, as native milkweeds can build up this OE disease as well, but then they go dormant over the winter, and that naturally cleanses the plant of that parasite. But since tropical milkweed doesn't go dormant over the winter, there is no opportunity for the plant to cleanse itself. If you do have tropical milkweed, that's okay. You don't have to rip it out, but the recommendation is to mimic the natural cycle of native milkweed by cutting the tropical back in the fall and keep cutting it back until the spring. So you don't want to the bottom picture is showing somebody cutting back their tropical milkweed. You can also find tropical milkweed that just has yellow flowers like the one in this picture. So you cut it back a few inches above the ground and keep cutting it back all winter long until the spring. We we have been experiencing some mild winters. This year was particularly a mild winter. And so some of our native milkweeds aren't going dormant because it's not getting quite cold enough. So in those types of circumstances, we would recommend cutting back your native milkweed too. But the good news is, there is a lot we can do to help. Even though the situation looks pretty bad for monarchs, we can do a lot to help. So some of the things we can do is to plant flowering plants to provide a nectar source. And you want to choose a diversity of different plants that have different bloom times so that there's a continuous source of nectar for monarchs and other pollinators throughout the year. We would definitely recommend planting native plants. There are so many beautiful and durable native plants, a lot of which don't need very much water. So that is really great for our climate as well. And, these plants are naturally adapted to the climate here. Plant host plants for butterflies like native milkweeds. These are becoming more and more available. One thing to just bear in mind is that native milkweed, like the narrowleaf milkweed, which is the most commonly available one in California, it does actually like some water. Even though it's a native plant, it's not super drought tolerant. In fact, in the wild, it's found in riparian areas where there is access to water or seasonal water. So it does like a little bit more a little bit more water than other native plants. That's maybe one reason why people can get a little discouraged with milkweed. They don't realize that it needs that water. And so, it looks like it's dying. Also, maybe people don't realize that it goes dormant over the winter. So, if you do grow native milkweed, don't worry if it looks like it's dead in the wintertime. Just keep giving it water if there's not seasonal water available. Another good thing to do in your yards or spaces that you use is to leave some bare ground for nesting bees. A lot of our native bees nest in the ground. So you want to leave some space for them to do that. And I know, it's often tempting to keep our gardens nice and clean and pristine, but leaving seed heads on your flowers is actually great. It helps feed the birds. And then some of those like dead flower stalks can also be utilized, and also tree limbs can be utilized for tunnel nesting bees. A lot of native bees also nest in like hollowed out wood or the pithy stems of plants. So, leaving that stuff around is actually great for wildlife. And of course, avoid herbicides and pesticides as much as possible. And when you buy plants at the nursery, especially host plants, ask if they've been treated with pesticides, particularly systemic pesticides. Sometimes we get the question of, but isn't milkweed toxic? And yes, it is, but it's not. Hopefully, it's not a detriment, or it shouldn't stop you from planting it. Milkweeds contain cardenolides. These are chemicals that provide a defense mechanism for monarchs. They are able to metabolize those chemicals, and it makes them toxic to the animals that want to eat the monarch. Milkweeds can be toxic to humans and animals because we're not adapted in that same way. And even small doses can be lethal to some animals. The risk to dogs and small children are undocumented, but they're thought to be low because milkweed does not taste good. Nobody wants to eat it. It's very bitter. So I think, any dog that were to try it would definitely not end up eating it because of that bitter flavor. But one thing to bear in mind is that the plant does have this milky sap, and that can be an irritant. So try to avoid touching your eyes or mouth or skin after you've handled milkweed, and just wash your hands right away after touching it. That's what we always recommend to, school gardens who are growing milkweeds or families who are wanting to grow milkweed in their yards. There are lots of ways to engage in monarch conservation as, beyond growing milkweed and nectar plants in your yard. You can contribute to some monarch community science efforts to help monitor monarchs and what they're doing throughout the year. The Xerces Society has a Western monarch and milkweed mapper, which is a really cool tool where people can record observations of monarchs at any life cycle stage, as well as observations of milkweed. This is especially important to help us get a better picture of what monarchs are doing during the fall and winter, especially when they should be overwintering. So, building up a greater pool of information about what monarchs are doing throughout the year is very helpful for understanding how we can better conserve monarchs. You can also participate in the Thanksgiving count. There's a website here called the Western Monarch Count. If you go to that, you'll see all the historic overwintering sites where you live. So you can look up a map and find the sites near to you, and you can sign up to monitor one of those sites and record any monarchs that you may see overwintering or just even present at those sites. And that's very helpful. I will say that nobody found any overwintering monarchs at any of the San Diego overwintering sites last year, though. But it's still, worth doing every year to see if there are any changes. There is right now a campaign called Miles for Monarchs. This is being run by the Monarch Joint Venture, which is a national organization. It's kind of like a virtual 5K type thing where you walk, run, hike, bike, or paddle to rack up miles to support monarchs. This helps to raise money for conservation efforts, but also helps just raise awareness as well. You can create your own habitat and get a habitat certification sign to, show neighbors or people that pass by what you're doing in your yard. And one of those certification schemes is called a Monarch Waste Station. You do have to apply and meet certain criteria, and then there's a small fee. But once you do all of that, they'll send you this really lovely little sign, and you can be, join one of the thousands of others who are Monarch Waste Stations. And another, great thing you can do is help just spread the word. Also, right now, there are a couple of bills going through Senate and Congress. One is called the Monarch Act of 2021, and the other is called the Monarch and Pollinator Highways Act. The Xerces Society has lots of information about those bills on its website, and also a form for each of the bills that you can sign to send to your local elected official to encourage them to support it. The Xerces Society website is Xerces, that's xerces.org. For the Monarch and Pollinator Highway Act, it would be that website, and then /MPH-Act. And for the Monarch Act, it would be the Xerces website /Monarch-Act. And I can share those links too. Again, the Xerces Society, in recognition of the perils of the Western monarch migration, has created a call to action with 5 key steps to do, at least in the short to medium term, to conserve monarchs. And those are listed here. And there's also a link, but it's the things that we've been talking about. So protecting overwintering sites, restoring breeding habitat, protecting monarchs from pesticides, and just learning more about them so that we can figure out how we can better aid them in recovery. There's a national campaign as well called Play It Safe. This is facilitated by the American Zoological Association, which our local zoo is a part of and very active in. And so they've created all these really simple messages that can be used throughout the year to spread information about monarchs. So really simple stuff like plant monarch safe plants, so without pesticides, or cut down tropical milkweed in the fall. And Paige Howarth from the zoo here wrote a really great blog about it, and the link is there. And again, we can share these in the chat later on, or I can send them by email too. So we talk about native milkweed, and in particular, we really feel, the Pollinator Alliance really feels it's important to have a local source of native milkweed. Historically, native milkweeds that you can buy at garden centers or nurseries don't come from Southern California. Those seeds are being collected in Central or Northern California and then grown and then shipped to nurseries here. And the more we talk to people about milkweed, the more we find that milkweed is actually, even the same type of milkweed, like let's use narrowleaf milkweed as an example, is really different in different parts of its range. So we just met with a researcher, a retired botanist, who's been tasked with traveling the state of California to document early emerging milkweed species. So this one is a different milkweed species, but as he's been going, he's been looking out for narrowleaf milkweed. And we were telling him that here it grows in riparian areas and can get really tall. But he was saying where he's from in Oregon, it's a very short plant and grows in kind of disturbed dry soils. So, it just goes to illustrate that plants that we're getting from other parts of the state are probably not going to do as well in our soils, in our climate here. So that's, really why we feel like it's important to have a local native source of milkweed. So it's going to thrive in our climate. It's adapted to and will thrive in our climate. Also, it's important to have this local native milkweed because, their tropical milkweed is so prevalent, and it's becoming clearer and clearer that there are lots of issues attached to growing it. So what we're doing is collecting seed from the wild, so naturally occurring milkweed, and taking that seed and growing it at different sites so that we can then develop a seed and a plant source of milkweed, which can then be distributed and sold to people through local nurseries. That a lot of this, so we're in year 2 of the project, and we're nearly at a point where we can start selling the milkweed to the public. And in fact, Butterfly Farms, I think, does already sell some milkweed from this project that was collected from Carlsbad. So, very local to you guys in Solana Beach, or fairly local anyway. And this will be, again, for all scales of habitat, from home gardens to restoration projects. Lots of different agencies and organizations are involved in this effort. We have lots of partners. We're collecting from across the county. The first year we collected something like 9 grams of seed, but this year we've got about 120. So it's really ramping up. We're really ramping up the efforts this year. This is a map that shows the distribution of narrowleaf milkweed across San Diego County. So it really is found across pretty much all of the county. So we'd say it's probably the most relevant or appropriate milkweed to grow if you're looking to create monarch habitat. These are a couple of pictures of milkweed in the wild. So it can grow up to 6 feet tall. And these are both kind of riparian areas in Carlsbad. These are some fish and wildlife entomologist and a California Department of Fish and Wildlife scientist collecting milkweed. So you would bag the seed pods, wait for them to dry out, and then go back and collect the seed pods once they're ready and mature to collect, or when the seed is ready to be harvested. We've also been collecting in Hamul, so a totally different part of the county, but lots of milkweed grows out there as well. I wanted to show you a really quick video that our partners, the Earth Discovery Institute, made about milkweed. Do we have time to do that? This is like more or less my last slide. Carol or Betsy, does that sound okay?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and stop this share and start a different share because I think it'll be easier to play directly from YouTube. One sec.
Mary Duffy with the Earth Discovery Institute. We're here in the backcountry of southeast San Diego County to introduce you to native milkweeds. Milkweeds in general are the host plants of monarch butterflies. Narrowleaf milkweed, Asclepias fascicularis, is easy to identify by its long, pointy leaves that grow along the main stem, which is tall and erect. It's not often that you find patches of narrowleaf milkweed this large. It grows in coastal sage scrub and chaparral plant communities, and it really likes these low swales like we found here. The flower develops in late summer at the top of the plant. You can see it develops these flower clusters or umbels, which actually consist of many little flowers that are the true flowers, probably 20 of them here or so. And each flower, singularly, has 5 petals and these long lobes that extend back, which are often anywhere from lavender to pink to even greenish colored. Narrowleaf milkweed is a wonderful example of a native plant that supports not only the threatened western monarch, but an incredible diversity of pollinators and other insects. By late summer, the pollinated flowers start to set seed. They develop long, smooth pods. These will slowly dry and split, releasing seeds that are taken on a breeze by silky hares or pappus. Not only are western monarch populations in decline, but the habitats that support narrowleaf milkweed are becoming scarcer throughout Southern California. This limits food resources not only for monarch butterflies, but for native bumblebees, Pepsis wasps,
milkweed bugs, clearwing moths, and countless other unique and beneficial insects. We at EDI want to thank you for learning more about western monarchs and their native habitats, and for committing to plant more native milkweeds while encouraging monarchs to migrate by cutting back your ornamental and tropical milkweeds in winter. Thanks for doing your part to protect milkweed and monarchs.
Okay, thanks for letting me share that. I think it's just such a great illustration of how these milkweeds not only support monarchs, and they're so vital for monarchs, but they support so many other pollinating insects as well.
La mariposa ya
Oh, he's
llegó.
going.
La mariposa ya.
I don't know what's going on there. I think I forgot to stop the Zoom. Oh,
That was
gosh.
fun.
All right, let me figure out how to do that real quick.
Betsy, are you on?
I'm here.
Okay,
Yes.
sorry about that.
Thank you, Anne. That
Yeah, no
survey
problem.
of monarch activity, monarch life was absolutely fascinating. Betsy, have you collected any questions?
Yes, there are a few.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first one was actually about posting the links. So, Anne, do you think it makes the most sense for maybe you to do that after the Zoom, and then I could email that out to all the attendants?
Yeah,
That I
sure.
think maybe that's easier though, rather than having to put it all into the chat and then have people copy it.
Yeah.
So, okay, so yes,
Definitely. Yeah, I'll
we
send
will-
you all of the links.
there were so many really great links. Okay, so Michelle Stribling asked, she said, we used to have an overwintering site on South Sierra Ave in these large trees. The trees are no longer there. Are there certain times or types of trees that they overwinter in?
Yeah, so in San Diego, often they're overwintering in eucalyptus trees. That wouldn't be their like natural overwintering tree, but I think commonly here in San Diego County, we see them many of the overwintering sites have eucalyptus. There is, I think, a type of pine that they also would normally overwinter in as well.
Okay, thanks. Another question from Nancy is, are there any specific flowering plants that are good for nectar?
Gosh, I think, different pollinators tend to prefer slightly different plants. So like pretty much any flowering plant you plant will be good. But I see monarchs and butterflies on plants that aren't or flowers that aren't super deep, like not super tube shaped. Although I think they will use them, but like there's a really lovely plant there's a type of verbena, a local or a native verbena that they seem to like a lot. Yarrow, plants that have like a more shallow face, I think, but really, and sunflowers, like the, San Diego sunflower. I think the most important thing is just having a succession of bloom times so that you can provide that nectar throughout the year. I can send you all also the pollinator plant list in our toolkit to give it's probably 15 to 20 different plants that are good for monarchs and other pollinators.
Thanks. That's great. Okay, a couple more messages coming in. Jessica says that we have a monarch way station in Solana Beach. Last spring, we had many, many monarchs here laying eggs, but as of yet, we have seen none. Do you think we will see any this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, but it's just probably a timing thing. I was just noticing that, in past years around this time, I was having lots of monarchs in my yard. I have a lot of native milkweed, but not this year so far, not yet. Maybe it's just going to be a little bit later, maybe like July, August, we'll see it. I would say yes, we will.
Yeah, and just I have been doing a little count, Jessica, and I, as of today, have 18 eggs and 4 caterpillars. Okay, on my tropical milkweed. But I was going to say I just got some native milkweed from Cindy and Kathleen, and it's still in pots. And I have noticed that even though I'm getting more eggs laid on the tropical, they're not laying on the native. And so my question for you is, does the monarch have to have been born? Will it, as an adult, only lay on the type of milkweed that it, as a caterpillar, ate?
That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer, but I think I would suspect that it would lay on any milkweed. I have heard people think that they do really like the tropical, and I'm not sure why that is. They really do like it a lot, but they wouldn't have had it until tropical milkweed was naturalized here, so they definitely use all of it.
So we need to teach them to go back.
Reintroduce it, yeah.
Okay, Mary mentioned that today is World Bee Day, and so she was really thrilled to participate in this event. I didn't know it was World Bee Day. Thank you, Mary.
Awesome. I've forgotten that too. Cool.
Okay, and then let's see. Whoops, sorry, it's scrolling by. Stephanie, yes,
Mary has a question, but Mary, you
I-
are muted. There you go.
Yeah, I just
go ahead,
realized.
Mary.
I just realized. Thank you, Carol. I read in the Detroit Free Press today too a big article on the Great Lakes Bee Company and all they're doing for the bees. They just had a big fest, and they all came and got 30 to 60,000 bees in one of the colonies, and they're taking them. This is the big thing in Michigan. And they also provide bees out here in California for the almond production. And then, so they send them various places for the crops that are to be pollinated at that time.
Yeah, that's a big business for ag to transport bees like that.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, Stephanie is interested in starting a milkweed garden, and she wants to know who the best resource is to get started. Is it Butterfly Farms?
If you're in your general area, definitely Butterfly Farms. They're so knowledgeable and so helpful. And yeah, I think you'll have a lot of fun visiting them as well.
Okay, Nancy is interested in getting a toolkit. So whenever those come out, I guess we'll stay in touch with you. And
yeah, we our Pollinator Alliance is meeting next Monday, and we'll finalize the toolkit then, and then I'll send it on. But in the meantime, I'll send you the plant list.
She also has one chrysalis and a few caterpillars, so that's a good sign.
Cool.
Cindy, I should actually be letting people ask their own questions, but anyway, it's easier, I guess, to do it this way. Cindy uses enclosures to shelter the caterpillars, and last year she released 50 monarchs. And she refers people to Amazon and Butterfly Farms for these enclosures. And Cindy, I just ordered some today. So they're just the mesh things with the zippers, and you can put the plant inside. So you could preserve a source, I guess, of food if you are getting spots on your leaves or if you want to protect the caterpillars. What are your thoughts on that, Anne?
I mean, a little bit of, I think there is this kind of concern about captive rearing, which I don't think this is. But a lot of people do what you're talking about to protect them from the tachinid fly because they are very destructive. So yeah, like enclosing them so that the chrysalis can fully form and then the butterfly can be released seems fine. But there are they've changed the regulations about handling monarchs. So just make sure that you're not handling them.
Ah, interesting. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, I can share some information about that too.
Yeah.
Like they're even for like studying and education purposes, they really like the California Department of Fish and Wildlife is discouraging people from actually handling the butterflies. So tagging isn't even allowed right now.
And is that about transferring bacteria or viruses from humans to the butterflies, or?
I'm not exactly 100% sure of the rationale for that.
There was one more question. Jessica asked about the symptoms of OE and is there anything visible that we can see on the plants or on the butterflies to know if they're affected?
I don't think so. There are programs, again, we are not really allowed to do it here because of the handling, but that you can even put a piece of tape on the abdomen of a butterfly and then the spores come off on the tape. And there's a monarch monitoring program that's based in a different state that's really trying to get a better understanding of OE. but we're not allowed to participate in that right now because of the symptoms. But I don't, or because of the not, not being able to handle the butterflies. But I don't think it's visible to the eye.
Okay.
And there is a thought also that the scales on the butterfly wings can be harmed by the handling,
Yeah.
and then flight is affected.
Yeah, that sounds right.
That makes sense.
Does anyone else have a question?
I would like to make a comment if I may.
Sure.
I live at La Costa Glen, which is in Carlsbad, a retirement community. And we have a project here where we have the native milkweed in containers. And when eggs form, they are placed in large display cases in each library. And then we're able to stop in each library and watch the different phases of development. And then when the butterflies are ready for release, we sign up to carefully release in memory of somebody. So it's quite a nice project.
That's beautiful.
This is our second year to have this at La Costa Glen.
Nice.
Love that.
That's great.
Well, if there are no further questions, as Betsy and Anne have talked about, there is a great deal of information that Anne has shared with us, and we will distribute that to everyone who has joined us today. And thank you so much for a fabulous, fabulous presentation. And
Well, thank you.
happy monarching, everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for all being so interested in wanting to help too.
And just one last thing, we did record the session, and so if you have friends or people who missed this and would like to see it, they can contact Solana Beach Civic and Historical. We'll make that link available, and Anne, we can make it available to you too.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day, everybody. Bye. Happy B-Day. Bye.
Thank you, Anne.
Kathleen, are you still there?
No, Kathleen had to leave exactly
Oh,
now.
she left. Okay.
She has a 12:55 meeting.
Oh, okay. She just said something about, in addition to emailing resource links and toolkits to those on the call, we'll post the information on the websites, on Seaweeder and Civic and Historical Society. So that's good. We'll just do that. Now somebody,
I'm here.
oh, she's here. Hi.
I haven't left yet. I'm just getting my hair colored, so.
Oh, okay.
after
Do
I'm
we
down the street.
do we want to admit Donna Gulich and Janet Reschke back in? Or
If you want, I'm going to take off, but
I'm going to take off too. I think
that
it's.
was
I think
great.
Yeah,
I had to step away for a second. Did she have any surefire tips on starting those milkweed seeds?
no,
We're all struggling with this, but I finally, what is it now? It's been almost a month, over a month for some of my seeds. I'm starting to see sprouts.
Oh, you are after a month. Okay, and I'm keeping them pretty wet.
Yeah.
That's
It's,
well, you know what? We can, why not have a follow-on communication to everyone who signed up? And Kathleen, good question. And we'll just ask her how to germinate seeds if that's what we have.
well, we've been getting a lot of tips, and I posted a recording that the California Native Plant Society did. There's Donna. And I mean, I think, around the county, you see this huge patch of milkweed growing out in East County, but it's like, that's nature. And those of us trying to mimic nature are struggling a little bit.
yep.
Anyway, just keep trying. And Donna's muted, but to let you guys know, we've been working down at the community garden on the rail trail, and we've put in, I forget how many plants now, not quite 7, 8 10.
Oh, great.
We're hoping the Gophers don't get them.
Yeah, I'll check. So this is on the north or the south end? Is it the one across
The
from
one
City
across from
Hall?
City Hall.
Okay, I'll go and take a look at them too.
Okay. All
And-
right, I got to
Mhm.
run. Thanks.
Okay,
everybody.
bye. Thank you.
Okay, bye. Well,
That was great.
it really was. And so glad. Oh, you may still be recording.